Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, everybody. We'll be getting started in just 1 second. Give people 20 more seconds to join us, and then we'll be getting started. Okay, it's just past 3 o'clock here on the East Coast, so we'll get started. Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon, and welcome everyone. If you were planning to join ISPU's webinar, Causes of and Solutions to Climate Change, you are in fact in the right place. My name is Meira Neggaz, and I proudly serve as the Executive Director of the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And I'm so pleased to be with you here today talking about this very, very important topic. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for the webinar today. And for those of you who have joined us before, welcome back. For those of you who are new to ISPU, a warm welcome. As many of you know, this year marks ISPU's 20th anniversary. And just a quick note before we get started, to mark this 20th anniversary occasion, we are going to be hosting a virtual Price is Right game show on November 11th, so 11/11 at 11 a.m. Fun will be had by all. So come and join us if you are available and are interested, and we will put the registration link for that program in the chat box. It is virtual. And obviously, if you value this work and want to see more of it, there's definitely still time to support ISPU this year as we head into the end of the year season. It's really easy to donate, and every dollar invested supports original research and educational opportunities like today's webinar. So thank you for considering donating, and thank you to all who make this work possible each and every day. Today, we are really happy to be bringing you 3 amazing panelists, as well as sharing original research that we have done through our American Muslim poll. And as a nonpartisan research and education organization, the goal of these webinars is really to spark and have important discussions that combine this original research with leading expert interpretations to help equip all of you, our learning community, to make well-informed decisions and have well-informed conversations. And that is exactly what we plan to do today. Today's webinar is, in fact, the 4th in a monthly series of webinars that dove deep into new research findings from our American Muslim poll of 2022. Note that if you did miss the previous webinars, you can find all of them on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and listen in. The American Muslim poll provided a nationally representative survey of Muslims, Jews, Catholics, Protestants, white evangelicals, the non-affiliated, and the general public. And topics ranged from everything from demographics to discrimination, political engagement, to hot button topics such as the one we'll be talking about today, and much more. I won't go too deep into the methodology. It's available on our website, but the survey was fielded by our partner, SSRS, who does polling for the likes of CNN, CBS, Washington Post, and many more. And they are led by a team of polling experts, including Jonathan Best, their Vice President of Advanced Scientific Methods, and an esteemed public opinion researcher. All participants in our survey were given the exact same survey, which was fielded from February 22nd to March 21st of this year, so earlier this year. And the survey included 807 Muslims, 351 Jews, and then we did a general public sample from which we teased out Catholics, Protestants, white evangelicals, and the non-affiliated. Now, this year's poll included several questions that gauged American Muslim opinions on several hot button issues, policy issues that are dominating conversations of the day, especially during this midterm election year. And this is really important because while often we see national polling data on these issues, most, if not all, polls do not include Muslims as a breakout group. So Muslim opinions and voices are less taken into account, or they're just simply missing from discussions in the public square because there is no data on Muslim opinions. So Today, we'll be exploring views on the causes of and solutions to climate change and discussing the limited data that we collected on Muslim opinions and asking our expert panelists about the implications of the findings that we're going to share. It's a very timely discussion. We are essentially on the eve of the beginning of the 27th UN Conference on Climate Change, which is taking place this year in Egypt, I believe starting on Saturday. And the past few months have certainly brought this topic to the fore in the public square in so many ways. From the Supreme Court's ruling on EPA powers back in June, to the climate provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed earlier this year. We've seen no shortage of natural disasters, including wildfires, extreme heat, melting icebergs, and hurricanes, which have all dominated the news throughout the year. And most recently, you may have been seeing the news about climate activism that has been targeting well-known art and paintings in order to gain attention for this issue. So it's a very, very timely topic. Now, as we dive into the data, again, I'll be sharing data from our American Muslim poll. I did want to start with just a couple of slides that can provide some context. So first, it's important to remember that Muslims are the most diverse faith community that we studied. And the Muslim community has no majority race or ethnicity, and a high percentage of Muslims are from communities of color. This is really important in the context of climate change discussion because minority communities are often more likely to experience climate and environmental disasters and may be less likely or less able to protect themselves and bounce back from these occurrences. Muslims are also the most likely to be under-resourced. So about a third of Muslims live on less than $30,000 per year. And again, this compounds the problem, making it very difficult to protect from, live with, and bounce back from environmental challenges and natural disasters rather. Lastly, in terms of context, Muslims are also a very young faith community, with just over a quarter of Muslims aged between the ages of 18 and 24. So a high percentage of Muslims are and will be increasingly affected by climate change. So this year, in order to ascertain Muslim opinions about the causes of climate change and potential solutions, we posed two questions in our poll. The first question asked, how much do you think human activity, such as the burning of fossil fuels, contributes to global climate change? Now, what did we find? We found that Muslims were among the most likely group that we studied to see climate change as the result of human behavior. So more than half of Muslims believe that climate change is a great deal the result of human behavior at 56%. And this is sort of in the same ballpark as Jewish Americans, Catholics, and the non-affiliated, who all range between 48 and 65%. On the other end of the spectrum, just 35% of Protestants and 25% of white evangelicals in particular believe that climate change is a great deal the result of human behavior. Across faith and non-faith groups, we did not see any differences in gender. So men and women are equally likely to say that climate change is a great deal the result of human behavior. Now, if we look at people who hold the view that climate change is not at all the result of human behavior, so sort of the flip side of that, 1/4 of white evangelicals, so 25%, believe that to be the case. And they are more likely than all other faith and non-faith groups to believe that. So you can see in the chart that of other groups, it ranges between about 6% and 14% who say that climate change is not at all the result of human behavior. Now, if we look among American Muslims in particular, so as a faith group, there was little difference by age. In fact, all age groups were equally likely to express the view that climate change is a great deal the result of human behavior. And that ranged from about 47% to 59% across the age groups. However, among the general public, we find that older Americans, those above the age of 50, were less likely than younger age groups to hold that view. Now, if we look across racial and ethnic groups within Muslim communities, we find that Asian Muslims were the most likely to believe that climate change is a great deal the result of human behavior at about 2/3 of that population. And Black Muslims were the least likely to hold the view that climate change is a great deal the result of human behavior at 46%. And white and Arab Muslims fell somewhere in the middle. If we look at the opposite of that, on the flip side, Black Muslims were most likely to believe that climate change is not at all the result of human behavior. So 13% of Black Muslims held that view, compared to Arab, white, and Asian Muslims who ranged between 1% and 5%. Now, the second question we asked was about how best to increase reliance on renewable energy sources. So is that, would the government be best placed to help with that, or the private marketplace? Now, what did we find? We found that Muslims are among the most supportive of government regulations to encourage reliance on renewable energy. So just over 70% of Muslims felt that government regulations were the best option. And this again was on par with the non-affiliated and close to the roughly 2/3 of both Jews and Catholics who said the same. These are higher percentages than the 56% of Protestants, the 38% of white evangelicals specifically, and the 63% of the aggregated general public who felt that the government was best placed to encourage reliance on renewable energy. Now, again, if we look at the flip side of that, the people who supported the private marketplace as a solution, we find that at 62%, white evangelicals are the most likely to believe that the private marketplace is the solution to encourage reliance on renewable energy sources. Now, again, if we look at the breakdown among Muslim communities, we find that American Muslims of all ages are equally likely to believe that government regulations are needed to increase reliance on renewable energy sources. But we do find that Muslims over the age of 50 are more likely than their counterparts in the general public of the same age to hold this view. So they are more supportive of government regulation. American Muslims between the ages of 30 and 49, however, are more likely to believe, or more likely than their older counterparts to believe, that the private marketplace will ensure reliance on renewable energy. So younger and older Muslims are more of the view that government regulations are in order, as that middle age range among Muslims are more likely, although still in a minority, to believe that the private marketplace will ensure reliance. Now, if we look at race and ethnicity within Muslim communities, we find that Asian Muslims are most likely to believe in government regulations at 82%, while white Muslims are more likely to believe in the private marketplace at 30%. And this echoed similar findings among the general public, where white Americans are less likely than Black and Hispanic Americans to believe in government regulations as part of the solution to climate change, and are more likely to support the private marketplace as a solution. Even still, white Muslims are more likely than white Americans in the general public to support government regulations. So we can see that Muslims across the board generally favor government regulation to combat climate change. But we also know that Muslims are the most likely faith group that we studied to face obstacles to voting, which is really important, obviously, if you're looking towards government regulation. So nearly half of Muslims have faced obstacles when they have tried to vote. And that's compared to less than a quarter of all the other groups that we studied. And young Muslims who are going to bear the brunt of climate change into the future are most likely among Muslims to experience these voting obstacles at more than half, so at 55%. So these are issues that need to be taken into account as we start considering solutions to climate change. Now, to help us tease out what this all means, what does this data tell us, and how can we interpret this in the real world, we're joined today by an absolute expert panel, and I'm very excited to head into conversation with them. So in order to get going as soon as possible, I'm actually not going to go through their bios. We'll be posting their bios in the chat so you can get to know them a little bit, and we'll dive right into our questions for them. So panelists, if you could come on screen, that would be great. Welcome, welcome. So Savim, I'm actually going to start with you. Green Muslims is a pioneer in raising awareness and combating climate change and addressing environmental issues. Can you tell us a little bit about what changes, if any, you've seen over, your time within the American Muslim community working on these topics? What changes have you seen around opinions and actions around climate change?
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Meira, thank you so much, everyone at ISPU, for the invitation, and thank you so much for doing this survey and including the climate issues here. I have been with Green Muslims for almost 4 years now, and when you ask this question, I think back to how I felt, or what I felt the answer would be 4 years ago. Well, I was already personally involved with various climate action groups outside of the Muslim community. And I tended to be the only obvious Muslim participating in those groups. So people would always come to me and ask me, why aren't Muslim Americans more involved in climate action? I remember that question very clearly, and I'm happy to say I don't hear it as much anymore. Back then, I would say, well, so we're talking 2018, I would say, oh, well, we have other issues that are right in our face right now with the political climate, for example. And that's where it's not that we don't care, it's that we're very busy with other things. And we would move on from there. Well, a lot has happened since 2018, and I've seen a definite shift in interest in our community. Not only has there been some sort of a change in the political situation, but COVID also hit. And going back to the political change, there's more talk now about what's happening. Climate change is generally taken as a fact, and we just hear more about it in general. And so the Muslim community is also paying more attention and talking more about it as well. But the fact that COVID came into play as well, I think has also been a major influence. And so just a little bit about my perspective before I list these changes that I have noticed since I got involved almost 5 years ago. I am a naturalist by trade. I teach outdoor classes for children and adults as well, but mostly children, to help them understand the environment in which they are living. So I'm located in Northern Virginia. I teach about the plants and animals in Virginia. I take kids out to parks for hikes and lessons. Oh my goodness, with COVID, there has been a massive increase in demand for these sort of classes. So I start from here, but there are other factors as well, which I'll get into as well. So when I started back in 2018, I was attending more rallies and group gatherings, and I have to tell you, the Muslims were already there, but it was younger Muslim Americans. It was high school students and college students who were participating in rallies and joining movements like the Sunrise Movement. So I hadn't realized it until I started going and looking around, but the younger generations knew what was going on. My generation, maybe not so much, but those who were in college and high school were already involved. And so they're continuing their work. Those are the ones who say they're going to be affected. And it's true. The worse, if we don't change, things are going to keep getting worse and worse, and the younger generations will feel more of an impact than we will. And they know it, and they are active. It's not necessarily Muslim groups, but there are Muslims involved in these student groups. So I have to commend the young people for already having been involved, even back in 2018. Nowadays, what I'm noticing more of, my perspective is that of a parent. And so I'm very much aware of what other parents are doing. Parents definitely want their children to be healthy. And now healthy means having a healthier lifestyle, including what they eat, what they're exposed to. So within our communities, I'm seeing more of a push for natural and organic products. And even beyond that, many families are starting to want to grow their own vegetables at home. And they have their home gardens. They're trying to take care of things all on their own, keep it more natural. And that actually has an even better impact on the environment. It's healthy for the families, but it also is healthy for the environment, as oftentimes organic products get shipped from all across the globe, and the whole shipping process and how things are produced can do more harm to the earth than we might realize. So at a personal family level, there is more interest in being healthy, and healthy involves factors that have an impact on the environment and vice versa. They want the food to be healthy, they want the products to be healthy. And I think this should be taken into consideration too when looking at concern about the climate. Also along those lines, and what I touched upon first thing, there are more parents wanting their kids going outside and learning about what's around them, learning how to do stuff outside. And I do think COVID, this is what I call the silver lining of COVID, because my business has boomed. It was better to go outside than to be inside. So now more people are outside and they're learning about what's outside. And I think this is going to be an amazing opportunity to start to appreciate our natural environment and climate in general. When we start to see how we humans are impacting what's around us, then we'll start to think about the things that we can do to diminish that impact and to start to improve things here on Earth. So I see this as a major plus, just this interest in wanting to learn more about our Earth, our planet, nature, what's around us, other than just people and buildings and cars. And then another more direct change that I've noticed is that our institutions, our mosques, our Islamic centers, even our organizations have started thinking about greening their facilities. And this really wasn't an issue back in 2018, but now I'm hearing about, especially here where I am in the DMV, local mosques are receiving grants to take these first steps. Oftentimes it can start with something as seemingly small as having a native plant garden. Wow, Muslims are thinking about native plants now. 5 years ago, I couldn't get into much of a conversation with anyone about this, but now they're learning about why it's better to grow plants that are local and attract the local insects and birds and animals, and why it's good to have gardens at your mosques and to not just put anything there. And then this is really just the first step. There, beyond starting this native plant garden, then you take the steps to green the facilities in ways that require making changes to the building. Maybe it's adding solar panels or retrofitting to save energy. And actually, I feel like Corey might be a better person to discuss this as well, because she's seeing some of these activities taking place. And then also at our Islamic centers, I'm seeing more not just interest, but a passion towards having a less wasteful Ramadan. It was always quite ironic to me that Ramadan, our blessed month, we tend to waste a lot of food. We tend to use disposable, even plastic and styrofoam plates and cups, and these things are not, we know that they're not good for the environment. The last few years, so many mosques, Islamic centers have been reaching out to us, and probably to Green Ramadan as well, for advice on having less waste and using fewer disposables during their iftars. And that's wonderful. That is actually what started Green Muslims nearly 15 years ago, that effort to have a wasteless iftar. And now it's finally spreading amongst all of the institutions that I interact with are making some effort to have less waste and fewer disposables, less trash during Ramadan. And so we know that the mindset is shifting, which is wonderful news. Now, all the things I'm talking about are at smaller levels, getting involved with nature, learning to waste less. But these are the first steps towards major changes. So I can't wait to see what's going to happen at institutional levels, but also at personal family levels in the years to come. Inshallah, more Muslims will be investing in electric vehicles, maybe getting solar panels put on their homes, and getting more involved in climate action in general, joining other groups that are trying to bring about more change. But I really do feel very positive at this point, because over the last 5 years, there has been a massive shift, as far as I can tell, at personal levels and small institution levels, to start paying attention to our impact on the earth. And the whole fact that ISPU included this in the survey is also a very big sign of that. So there's still a lot of work to be done and more things for us to get involved with. But in regards to climate positive personal changes and involvement in climate action, I feel like it's happening already. And I look forward to seeing what occurs in the coming years. I mean, at a personal institutional level, Green Muslims is very busy these days. We are continuously being invited to speak to groups, especially student groups. There tends to be a focus on young people, but that's fine. They're the ones that are going to need to change their whole mindsets so that they take better care of the planet. But we're always speaking to student groups, taking them out on educational nature hikes, talking about why caring for the environment is a core aspect of our deen. It's a part of Islam, and we were placed here as the Khalifa of the earth. And now a more common interpretation of Khalifa is steward. So we are the stewards of the earth. It is our Islamic responsibility to take care of the planet. And I feel the change is coming.
Perfect. Thank you so much for walking us through that. And thank you for modeling being outdoors. I actually love that you're modeling good behavior for all of us by being outside. So we'll come back to you, I'm sure, in a little bit. And just a reminder to everyone who's joining us, we will open it up to questions after all of our panelists have had a chance to share some thoughts. So please, if you have questions for our panelists, please put them in the Q&A box, and we'll be getting to those once we hear from all three. So I'm going to actually go to Samra next. Samra, for some people, environmental issues and climate change are not necessarily part of their everyday struggles. Even if they care about it, may not be something they deal with every single day. But for some people, these issues are really much part of their everyday reality. How have climate change and environmental pollution impacted your local community? And sort of define what community you're talking about, and what can the rest of the country take away from your experience, your community's experience?
Sure. So I live in the southeastern part of Dearborn, Michigan, which when you guys talk about like the Motor City and people think Detroit, you're actually talking about the South End. This is where the Ford factory is that makes the #1 vehicle in the country, the Ford F-150, is located. There are several steel mills and different companies that service Ford Motor Company. And to really know about the area of the South End and what it is, you have to kind of know about the history of the area. And just really briefly, I'll talk about that. Ford actually needed cheap labor, and what more, where can you get cheap labor? It's typically in communities of color or in immigrant populations. So this area, the company had an insatiable appetite to feed its assembly lines. And this area became a ground where immigrants would come, a landing map for those to come here and live the American dream, work in the factories, and move on. Now, there was redlining in the United States up until the 70s. And redlining basically meant that if you wanted to move into, for example, Dearborn, you had to move into a little boxed area, and it was literally drawn in red. So all of the immigrants that would come here, Syrians, Polish, Iraqi, Lebanese, Yemenis, they would all come to this specific area. The South End it's called the South End. It became the area that was a welcome area for all immigrants. But in addition to the redlining, there was also something called urban renewal, where the mayor and the city actively tried not just to remove homes from this area, but to put all factories and all industrial types of complexes specifically into the South End. So the result of that is what we have today. It's an area that is 96% Yemenis, primarily immigrants. It's an area that has over 42 major and minor source polluters within a very close vicinity. That has resulted in non-attainment in sulfur dioxide and ozone particulate matter for over 10 years. And essentially what that means is that this area is not safe for human health for over the last 10 years, about 12 years now. So basically people are here and they're breathing bad air. And what that means is that their health is going to be impacted. And when we talk about that kind of impact, it's very serious. We're talking about kidney diseases, cancers of all sorts. We're talking about lead poisoning, and not lead from water, lead that you literally breathe in, formaldehyde, manganese in your blood and in your bodies. Essentially, what this has become is a state-sanctioned corporate genocide. So people here are dying and literally dying of diseases that they normally would not have had or normally would not have been exposed to even in their home countries. So my family in particular, we've had almost all of us, almost every single one of us that's lived in the South End has had a tumor removed, but we consider ourselves lucky because my mom is in remission. My neighbor, on the other hand, doesn't have any breasts. She's had to have mastectomy because of breast cancer. She's also one of the lucky ones because a neighbor a few blocks away had nasal cancer, and it's very rare to get nasal cancer. But if you can imagine a tumor growing in your nose, growing in your face, and going into your brain, that's how bad these kinds of diseases are. I've known 5 people that have died from nasal cancer when it is one of the rarest cancers in the United States. But again, the father that died of nasal cancer is also lucky because he was able to see his children and grandchildren get born. Kitty corner from me, another young mother died, but she was lucky because she was able to have children before she died. Down the street, another young woman died, but she was lucky because she was able to marry somebody before she did. And even luckier because a young man that died of brain cancer wasn't even able to get married and have children or see his grandchildren. We are literally living the impacts of corporate genocide as we speak. And we don't have the research, we don't have the data that has specifically been done on our area. So we look at data surrounding our area. We look at hospitalizations and we recognize that our area has 3 to 4 times the asthma rates of the state average. We look at our area and we see that 1/3 of pollution-related deaths in Wayne County are people of Middle Eastern descent. We look at our area and we see that our children have a higher level of blood lead levels than children in other parts of town. This affects their cognition. It affects their behavior and their aggression. And then we look at ultimately our reproductive health. My biggest concern is now that when I go to a doctor's office or my child goes to a doctor's office, they have to check the box that cancer has been in their family. This has altered our genealogy. It's literally detrimenting our lineage. It's ending our lineage by bringing these diseases into our genetics. And there's no taking that back. There's no fixing that. The only way to fix this is to ensure that corporations stop polluting in this area and stop committing environmental injustices around communities of color. Those are the day-to-day impacts that we have. I have to live with my son coming home with high blood in his bloodstream, high lead in his bloodstream, having to worry about, is his behavior due to this or due to something else? I have to worry about whether he's going to grow another tumor because when he was born 6 months in, he developed a tumor in his mouth that was larger than his tongue. I mean, these are things that we are living with day to day in this area. And as people leave the area, new immigrants come and are exposed to these new carcinogens, and they have to pass them on to their children. Most people where I live do not realize the impact of pollution on their bodies. They do not understand that the asthma that they've gotten or their child child has is now directly linked to the area that they're living in. It's nothing that was in their family before. It's nothing that was in their country before. It's something that was given to them upon their arrival to the United States. So when I look at this entire climate change conversation, I view it not just in the lens of how it's going to impact the future generations or how it's going to impact the rising sea levels. I look at it and how it's impacting us day to day. I look at it and how it's impacting people that are literally dying or having to get medical care that they can't afford. That's the way I view it. And that's why it's so important for us to stand up and speak up against it. We have to fix this. We can't just sit on it quietly. Thank you for ISPU for having me and for this conversation. Thank you.
Samra, thank you so much for sharing that. Look at the real sort of reality and impact on a day-to-day basis on people who are living this every day. I really appreciate that. Corey, I'm going to turn to you now. You co-authored, among many other important initiatives that you're part of, you co-authored the ebook 40 Green Hadith, Saying of the Prophet Muhammad on Environmental Justice and Sustainability. Can you talk a little bit about what Islam teaches about the environment or on the environment and why that teaching is important in helping us address climate change?
Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. What Islam teaches about the environment, there could be a whole session on that. I probably attended classes on this, but I want to focus, I'm going to make it concise and focus on a couple areas, inshallah. When we ask what Islam teaches about the environment, we can talk about several things. We can talk about justice, putting things in their proper place, justice to the Creator by worshiping Allah and obeying Allah. We can talk about justice to our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam by following his example, justice to our own souls by keeping our souls pure, justice to creation by giving them their rights. We can also talk about Tawheed, the unity of Allah and of all of creation as partners in worship of Allah. We can talk about being a Khalifa, a caretaker or steward of responsibility that's given to humanity by Allah. We can talk about amana, a sacred trust, the environment as being a sacred trust from Allah to be used responsibly. We can also talk about balance as part of our worship and as part of living a just life. And we can also talk about maslahah, or public good, actions that benefit the human community as well as other communities in creation. All living things are in communities just like we are. But what I like to focus on is justice and Tawheed and the spiritual elements of fighting against climate change. And you'll see sprinkles of the other principles that I mentioned as I focus on justice and Tawheed or unity. So the essence of Islam is justice. Justice towards our Creator, justice towards our own souls, justice towards creation. And when we do not give our relationship with the Creator justice, it also negatively affects our relationship with the creation. So scholars like Syed Hossein Nasser and Fazun Khalid, they say that the environmental crisis that we're facing now is a symptom of humanity's spiritual crisis. The climate crisis is a symptom of the injustice in our relationship with the natural world and with Allah. So Allah has given humanity the authority and the responsibility of being a Khalifa or a caretaker of creation. And we're charged with this responsibility, and it requires that we conduct ourselves ethically with the natural world. And if the caretaker is corrupt, then what the caretaker is taking care of is going to be corrupted. If the caretaker is distracted by desires for consumption or power or wealth or even knowledge, this is going to corrupt what the caretaker is taking care of. And this corruption as we've seen in Sister Summer's talk before, this corruption has come in the form of exploitation and domination and subjugation. And the caretaker's job is to maintain balance in nature and live in harmony with the natural world and live in harmony with humanity. And we can see the corruption that's spread through the earth, right? It says in the Quran, the corruption has spread through the earth, on the land and sea as a result of what people's hands have done. And Allah is going to tell us, is going to cause us to taste some of the consequences of what we've done, so that perhaps we're going to return to the right path. And so fighting against climate change is also a spiritual struggle. And that's why our faith is essential. It's a spiritual struggle to constantly remind ourselves that Allah made us caliphs, not consumers, not economic tyrants. It's a spiritual struggle to constantly remind ourselves that the natural world is our partner in worshiping Allah. Everything in the natural world is a co-worshiper, not a commodity. And so like Sebam, I'm seeing a lot of Muslims taking faith-based action on the environment. And so folks like Nana Fairman, who is a senior ambassador at Green Faith, and Ramis Kent, who's a permaculture expert, and the Black and Brown young Muslim sisters at Faithfully Sustainable, and Sister Huda Alkaf, she's leading the Wisconsin Green Muslims. And we have Muslims working at their masjid, like Sister Amina of Environmentals in St. Louis, and Brother Muhammad of Muslims for the Environment in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we have Muslim farmers and homesteaders and outdoor enthusiasts. They're all making sustainable moves at their local masjid or in their local communities, and sometimes around the world. And every day, a Muslim is discovering Ibrahim Abdul-Mateen's Green Deen book for the first time. And it's given life to their faith because they see it as a way to put their faith into action. So these people and many more, and I see some of them in the chat. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Aisha. These people are all waging an eco jihad, like a spiritual exertion and collective efforts to save our shared home and save our souls by stepping into the role of Khalifa. So we are the Khalifa. We're obligated by Allah to both use and protect air and water and plants and animals in a balanced and just way. And the Prophet Muhammad said, none of you truly believes until you want for your brother what you want for yourself. So our brother is our sister. Our brother is our neighbor near and far. Our brother is Muslim and otherwise. Our brother is all of creation. What do we want for our brother and ourselves? We want clean air. We want clean water. We want healthy food. We want a safe place to live. We want an honorable and safe way to make a living. And this is what our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and our faith calls us to in our struggle against the climate crisis. So every Friday, we're encouraged to read Surah Al-Kahf, right? And the stories in Surah Al-Kahf warn us about the trials that we're going to face in our lifetimes. The trial of faith, wealth, knowledge, authority. And there's this one verse that gives me a pause every time I read it. And it says, we have indeed made whatever is on earth as an adornment for it, in order to test which of them is best in deeds. And so this is our test. The climate crisis is part of our test in this life. And we need a spiritual transformation. We need a spiritual recalibration. And Islam and the example of our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is how we'll pass this massive test. It's how it will bring us back in balance with the natural world and allow us to be among those who are just. And may Allah count us among those who are just. Ameen.
Thank you so much, Corey. And Samra and Savim, thank all three of you so much for those sort of introductory remarks and really expanding our understanding of this issue. If you could all come on camera, I'm going to open it up now to our audience. We have a couple of questions to start, but if others have any questions, please do post them in the Q&A box. I will be keeping my eye on the Q&A box. Two questions in there so far. So one, someone asked specifically about Siviam, I think you had mentioned this about organic food and the importance, how people are placing importance on their health, but how that also impacts the environment. And they're asking specifically, does eating organic food help address climate change? Is that a correct understanding? And maybe I can add to that question in particular for any of the panelists. What are some of those individual actions that people can take on a daily basis that can help, that can genuinely help?
That is an excellent question. I know that for many who can afford to make these changes, keeping the food organic especially for your children is very important. But it turns out that organic, the label organic, is not necessarily good for the environment as a whole. I'm not an expert, but I am particularly interested in these issues. And my general understanding is that eating local is better for the earth in general. Oftentimes, eating local and eating what's in season has less of an impact on the planet, not only in how those fruits and vegetables, how the produce is raised, but also the shipment of the produce. So if you want to help the environment, stay local, stay in season, that's the best thing you can do. Organic also often means going out of the way to grow something somewhere and then shipping it long distances at a time when it's not necessarily in season. And so it has a climate impact beyond even just growing that vegetable. It can be, the burning of fossil fuels to get it from one point to another, but it can also sometimes be the efforts that need to be made to have it labeled as organic. So if I could give one small bit of advice as to something that hopefully most people can do that has a positive impact on the planet, eat local and in season.
Thank you so much. Corey, Samra, do you have anything to add to that particular? Yep, Samra, go ahead.
Yeah, so in my area, there are days, they call them air quality alert days, where basically it tells you that the air outside is so bad that you shouldn't go outside and you shouldn't do certain things. And I'll go over those certain things because they're not just good for those days, they're actually good all days of the year. Some of the things that we're told not to do is like filling gas and using your vehicle. And that's true all days of the year. If you are able to use a bike or walk to get to somewhere, obviously that has an impact on the environment. In Michigan, the #1 source of pollution is from transportation. So what we want to do is reduce the use of the vehicles and go walk somewhere, ride a bike, or invest in an electric vehicle. Other things that we're told to do are like not paint your open paint or utilize it during those days. There are also the way they tell us you shouldn't barbecue outside. Turns out that barbecue is actually bad for the environment. So if you are able to grill something or braise it and use it, cook on a stovetop, that's actually better than you going outside and using the barbecue. So there are things that you can do that do help impact the environment, but most importantly, it's the mobile source emissions that if we can reduce that would significantly help the environment.
Great, thank you so much. Another question in the chat box, in the Q&A, is about if you could elaborate a little bit more on how Muslim communities in the United States are practicing increasing climate awareness. So how exactly are you all working to raise awareness on this very important issue?
I think I can address that a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's an issue with awareness in the Muslim community about climate because we're in about environmental justice as well. I think we're aware because many of us are living it. Many of us are like Sister Samra. Many of us are living these challenges. Many of us are living through, fires, freakish snowstorms, flooding. Many of us have relatives in other places who are living this as well. So I think awareness is there. I think it's time for us to talk about it more in our mosques and our community centers. I think it's more a time for us to, our leaders, to talk about more in the khutbahs. I think it's time for us to make connections between faith and our action, just like Sister Summer and Sister Sebam are doing. So I think awareness is there, but I also think it needs, more discussion and more time for people to get out in the environment and talk about it while we're outdoors, and talk about all these gifts that we've been given by Allah and how we've corrupted them. And not necessarily us, but how we've been used by corporations, like Sister Samra has explained. So awareness is there, but we still have work. We need to do the work.
I can add to that directly. So, one of the things that we're taught in Islam, some of the hadith about trees, is that if the last moment or last second of life is there before Judgment Day, one of the hadith says you should take that moment to plant a tree. There's another hadith about how trees provide charity, basically shelter to animals and insects and whatnot. So we're taught in Islam these things. Some of the things that we're doing as residents, we've joined with other nonprofits, we've called the city, we've called the corporations, and we've moved the needle some. So we have like a fugitive air dust ordinance that limits the amount of particulate matter into the air. It's basically fine dust matter that's pollution. We've had an ordinance passed in the city for that. We're working on getting an anti-idling ordinance. So basically, if a truck or a bus or a car is running, that's that's not only wasting gas, but it's causing emissions in the area. We've worked to get grants and plant hundreds and hundreds of trees in our area. We've worked to bring rain gardens, several hundred square feet of rain gardens to this area. We're currently working on a green schoolyards initiative, which is basically transforming 2 schools into outdoor classrooms, outdoor spaces, giving them permeable surfaces in order to help mitigate flooding and help absorb some of the pollution in the area. And the last thing that we're doing is working on a supplemental environmental project with the corporation. And basically, those have happened quite often in our area, where citizens take it upon themselves to sue for the enforcement of the Clean Air Act, and then it forces the company to pay fines and do a project in the community that's being impacted. So there are several things that we're doing as Muslims, in accordance with what we're taught as Muslims, to help change the environment and correct some of the wrongs that are happening as we speak. And there is more to be done. It's an all hands on deck type of situation, where we just don't have enough activists in our area, enough people that know what's going on, that will be involved in this. So it's like almost like a handful of us that are working, but we are doing the things that are helping to move the needle, inshallah. And I'm grateful, because it's not just me, it's always a team effort in where I live. So thank you.
Great.
So if I could,
yeah, please go ahead.
sorry, just one last thought. In addition to everything that was mentioned already, oftentimes it's those who are most directly affected who become active first. The change is coming. It is happening. I see what has occurred over the last few years even. So I'm very optimistic about people becoming more involved, but I also feel that the time has come for those who are not suffering yet to get more involved. And that's where the education comes in. Maybe even our organization could be working harder to push for more activism, But I have noticed a lot of support from other climate organizations as diversity becomes key in funding and in programs for other groups. There is now more of an outreach to the American Muslim community to get involved in climate action. So inshallah, God willing, the time has come for us to see it being common amongst those who are already feeling the impact and those who are not yet feeling as direct an impact of climate change, to know that we need to be involved to make change happen. And that's our religious obligation as well.
Maybe one last question from me. I'm sort of curious, given the findings that we presented earlier, we only asked 2 questions on our poll, but it's some of the only data that we know of that captures Muslim opinions on some of these issues. I'm curious if anything struck you all in any of those findings. Was there something that stood out as interesting or curious or thought-provoking that you hadn't seen before, or does it somewhat jibe with what you've been seeing? And if nothing comes to mind, that's okay. I'm just sort of curious if anything stuck out.
For me, I can answer. I was floored by the number of people who said not at all, that human impact does not have anything to do with climate change. I expected some, but to have such a large number or percentage of people saying that and denying it is appalling, and I was shocked, honestly, when I heard you say that. So for me, that really was a sticking point. The other thing I thought about was, wow, such a large number of Muslims acknowledge this. Then why aren't there such a large number of Muslim activists in this area? And I don't know that there aren't, but from what I've seen, I'm curious, like, what those numbers, that's leading me to think, like, what are the numbers of people that are actually doing something about it, that are actually speaking up about it, considering the numbers that are there. But those are the 2 things that really stuck out to me.
That's great. Thank you. Corey, Siviam, was there anything that stuck out at you?
Actually, my answer is very similar to Samra's. I mean, I felt the change coming, and so I was happy that these questions were there at all. I mean, this is the first time that we're publicly being asked as a Muslim community what we think about climate change, to this degree anyway. And I was not surprised by the results, because I feel the change is coming anyway, but the question is the same, like, what is it going to take for us to become active? What is the boost that we need to start doing something about it now that we are aware of the problems?
So I agree with the Samram and Sevim. I'm not too surprised. Well, the results seems what I expected, unfortunately. It's just that I want to know as well, why aren't more people taking action? And I think that maybe the answer to that is that people are trying to survive and don't have the resources, don't have the time to take action. They have to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have time to go to a protest because they have to work and provide for their families. So I'm hoping that people are concerned, but they're just trying to survive, and that's why we don't get as much action and from the Muslim community.
If I may throw one thing in. Go ahead, Samra.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to add, like, just so people know a little bit, I'm not an environmentalist or some kind of geological or earth major or science major. I had a bachelor's in psychology like 20 years ago. I'm just a normal person like everyone else. And unfortunately, I've had to learn about what's going on in my surroundings. And I probably know more about particulate matter and chemicals than most mothers need to or have to know. But it's a testament to the fact that anybody can become an activist. Anybody could wear these shoes. If I could do it and I had no experience in this whatsoever, then I know anyone can. And I would urge and hope that some of these people that are watching this, that are present today, they take that initiative and they become involved and then become active, even if it's not something that you've worked in or studied in or see every day. So I know if I could do it, you can too.
I support both of those comments. I wanted to throw in a quick note that some new opportunities are opening up. I mean, with our work, it often helps for Muslims to get involved through a Muslim organization. And Green Muslims has recently partnered with Interfaith Power and Light in the DMV area to start a more climate action focused group. So just join our mailing list, keep an eye out. We're starting from the ground up. And I do know how hard it can be to find the time to add one more volunteer job to all of your work, but to be aware is a good first step. And then my hope is in the young people. I don't know how it was that I thought I didn't have time on my hands when I was in college. There's nothing like being a parent and working and everything else. But I think when the opportunities are easily accessible of getting involved with a group that's already involved, getting involved with a group that's already active, already organized, it'll make it easier for more Muslims to get involved, especially if they have a little bit of time on their hands. And that will be a big boost.
These answers were a great segue into another question that we have, really about, how do you transform activism into political action? So what can you share about organizing at the national level and work within the interfaith landscape to cooperate on these issues? Do you have recommendations on how people can get involved in that, or what are you seeing happening on that national organizing level?
You mentioned interfaith, and so I can start and say something about that. National, I'm the type of person that focuses small, and I'm having to push myself to expand, even for Green Muslims, but definitely at a personal level. But the opportunities are just coming. So first of all, interfaith work. There are other religious groups out there that want so badly to work with Muslims. They want to partner with us. And so we need to be open to those opportunities. I have another talk this evening that's an interfaith panel about why we as people of faith care about the earth. And so those opportunities are out there, and you can always, at an individual level, check and see what other local religious organizations are doing in terms of climate work, and offer to volunteer. National work has gotten much easier with Zoom. Let's put it that way. There are so many groups that you can get involved with at this point that you don't have to go to attend an in-person meeting. And so I would just do a little bit of research. If anybody's ready to get involved with other groups that are already out there, just Google and see what touches your heart. And they are always looking for more volunteers. And then you're part of an organization that can make bigger steps as well.
So as for me, I think how I work nationally is on Instagram. So it's like inspire others around the world using social media, and receive inspiration around the world from others, but act locally. That's how I do it. So I went to my masjid and I said, I think we need a green team. We need to promote the prophetic model of sustainability and community life. And they were like, oh, we were looking for you. It's a volunteer position. It's not paid, but it'll be paid by Allah, inshallah. So that's how I do it. I inspire and be inspired internationally, but work locally. That's what I can do. And so do what you can do.
So on my part, we've been in my community. We've been some of us have been advocating for decades, literally, and so we've learned a lot as far as how to effectuate the change on an individual level. We've attended council meetings. We've written to different offices, like the state reps, the mayor's office. We've called for meetings. We've attended board meetings and commission meetings, spoken out about it, sent letters, sent emails, and then posted and blasted them on social media. I mean, social media has had a profound effect on some of the politicians in our area. If you ever need to vocalize or publicize an issue, that's something we've done on an individual level, but we've recognized over time that there is strength in numbers, and we've had to organize and become a coalition, whether it's in the neighborhood association that I'm in, or by joining other nonprofits. So once I've done that, for me personally, joining like other organizations that have these endeavors and have other manpower and are collectively working with other orgs or the cities, then we were able to get grants, and we were able to put power on politicians, I'm sorry, I'm looking for the word, put pressure on politicians and different people. I've even joined a PAC recently, and PACs are very good ways of influencing elections, whether it's contributing to candidates or, putting out slates of people that are supportive of your causes. And then we've gained national recognition and national attention by doing so. We've had articles written about us. We've had a documentary that's in the works, but about this area. We've had House Rep the Rosalva from all the way from Arizona come out here. We've had the Attorney General of the state of Michigan come here. Different House representatives like Rashida Tlaib and Debbie Dingell have come out here to see what's going on the ground. And all it takes is that initial individuals coming forward and then collectively getting together to put pressure on the different people. That's how we gain attention and recognition, and change is coming. Grisalva has put forth a resolution to fight environmental injustices. So the way to effectuate change on the larger scale is to start you by yourself and start with others, and then come together. And once you have a group and you organized it, that's how you put pressure on people to change their ways, or to pass ordinances, or to do things that are beneficial to your community.
I have two somewhat specific questions from the audience. One is, I believe it's about sort of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And I apologize if I'm getting that wrong. Please correct me in the chat. But one person is asking about what type of education programs are available through Scouting, and are you aware of any? Do you know of any environmental education programs? The other question I'll throw out that's different, but I'll let all three of you answer either one if you have anything to add. The second question is, one of the hurdles that the person asking the question identified is sort of financial hurdles, that people want to get involved in things, but when you're working all day, it can sometimes feel harder to volunteer to do these sorts of things. So have you seen any ways to monetize some of these activities or initiatives and make it more financially possible for people to get involved?
Okay, I can take the easy question about Scouting. About funding, I don't know, maybe Seven, maybe you could do that one. But I am a Girl Scout troop leader, and there are different badges and programs that they have to help kids get outdoors and have an appreciation for the outdoors, and to be, I guess, climate warriors. So it's definitely out there for Girl Scouts. I'm not sure about Boy Scouts, but it's definitely there for Girl Scouts.
If I may follow up, again, I like working with kids. Fortunately, over the last few years, Green Muslims has been invited multiple times to lead Scout events, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts alike. And the other group that I'm involved with that gets invited to lead such events is the Master Naturalist group of a local community. So there are badges that can be tied to climate awareness, climate activism, awareness of nature. And if you happen to be in the Washington, D.C. metro area, just, feel free to check in with Green Muslims. Our website is greenmuslims.org, and you'll see more contact information there as well. But I love leading the badge activities. So please, if you're around here, I would be happy to come out. So there are definitely, and there's more of an effort too. My daughter is also a Girl Scout, and I've been pushing on her troop that we need to get more outdoor activities, more climate-based activities, and it can be really fun for kids too when you connect it to outdoor skills. The two can be brought together, and the children enjoy it quite a bit. Hurdles, grants. If you're an organization, start applying for grants. There really is this push for diversity. They want to support the Muslim community. If you have a nonprofit or if you have a religious institution, then it's much easier to get started. But look for grants that help with whatever your efforts may be. That's my 2 cents on that one.
Yeah, I'll add, I know the local Boy Scouts had come out to my area and had done tree mapping. And they came out another time and did something else. So there are activities that the Boy Scouts do. In terms of other educational opportunities, specifically in Dearborn Public Schools, there's a mandate to teach children about sewer infrastructure, water, and the water cycle and whatnot. So it has to be embedded in the curriculum. I'm not sure how it is in other districts or other states, or if it's even required in other areas. But I know for our area it is. Now we, as when I work with different organizations, like Friends of the Rouge or the Concerned Residents for South Dearborn, and we have something like a tree planting going on, I actually contact the schools. And about 2 weeks ago, we did have an actual tree planting for dozens of trees, and we got 100 8th grade students to come out and participate. So we partner with the schools. At one point, another organization came out to weed the gardens at the local school, and we brought one of the science classes to help with that endeavor. So we actually, as citizens, as residents, just reach out to the principals of the different schools and say, hey, can you bring these kids on a field trip? Can we come over there and do something sciencey with them? And they learn that way. And not only do they learn, but they become, because this is our community, these kids learn to take care of their community. They learn the level of importance for this tree, and they're not likely going to be kicking over a tree down the road that they helped plant. So we try to embed some of the work that we do with the schools. In terms of financial hurdles that we've come across, yes, it's not just the fact that we're working, but we need help. There's not enough manpower in our groups. So we try to facilitate as easily as possible, for instance, to have people come to our meetings. Like, we'll do a virtual meeting on noon on Sunday when we know everybody's just woken up, had their tea, and is ready to go and has nothing to do. We try to accommodate everybody based on their work. We also try to write grants, as Sevian mentioned that, bring either money into our community, but we also leave a little window in the grant to allow us for administrative costs, which would be to hire somebody to do the advertising or to do the educational component. So in different grants and different organizations that we're writing these things for, we do ask for a little extra money for the organization itself. And then in terms of the hurdles that the actual board members members have, we try to be at most accommodating as possible. You know, virtual has really become a thing ever since COVID, and I'm actually glad for it because I'm a single mom, and it's hard to go different places and to juggle all that. So there are financial hurdles. Additionally, like I live in a community that's over 50% low income. It's closer to like 2/3. So people have multiple jobs, people have limited vehicles. We try to be as best accommodating as possible in terms of getting people to be active.
Thank you all so much. I think we will leave it there. This was a really, really robust discussion. I learned a lot, and I really appreciate all three of you sharing your immense wisdom and experience with us. Before we go, just a few notes from us at ISPU. This is one of a number of topics that we have covered and will be covering. So please look out for future topics. Some of those include a focus on banking while Muslim, who are converts to Islam, the American Muslim family, and volunteering and neighborhood involvement. So if you haven't signed up for our newsletter already, I would encourage you to do so on our website, which is www.ispu.org, and look out for upcoming publications and webinars on those topics and much, much more. Also, you can read the full report of the American Muslim Poll 2022 at ispu.org/poll. It's really easy to find. I really, again, want to thank our thoughtful panelists, and I want to thank all of you as well for spending your afternoon with us. We are going to launch a 3-question poll. It will take you 2 seconds to fill it in. It wouldn't be an ISPU event without some kind of survey. So if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to answer these 3 questions, and you will need to scroll down for the third question. I'll give you 30 seconds to do that. Okay, and just a few other announcements from us before we sign off. As we mentioned, the full report is at ispu.org/poll, but we'll also be sending a follow-up email in the next week or so with a link to that and any other relevant research and information. Again, all of our previous webinars are available on our YouTube channel, and this will be available there as well. If you'd like to share with others in your network, please feel free. I will put a note in the chat if anyone would like to join us for our Price is Right event. For those of you familiar with Price is Right, it's a really fun game show. It's a quick half an hour virtually. You can join from the comfort of your own home and play along. And that is on 11/11 at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Lastly, just please continue to be ambassadors for the facts. A lot of you shared little vignettes of the work that you're doing on climate change and on environmental justice. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. I hope you'll continue to do the great work that you're doing and be an ambassador for truth and facts, and also to share our resources from ISPU with your networks as they may be helpful. So look out for a follow-up email next week. And thank you all so very much for joining, and a huge round of applause and thank you for our 3 amazing panelists. Thank you so much, Corey, Saveem, and Samra for joining us today and for the work that you're doing, which is, you've all got me inspired. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. So,
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for the opportunity to share.